6 tourists were poisoned to death and the hostel staff were then arrested. Survivors have spoken out in this case, saying that they tried to warn other tourists from going to this location due to how deadly it can be. But today, there is still an ongoing investigation, but the parents said that that really means that no investigation is being done at all. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Mckenna, and I cannot believe that I have not personally heard about this case prior to doing the research on it, so I'm hoping this is something I can spread awareness to a lot of you guys as well. If you know more about this case, let me know in the comments below, because there is seriously not much media coverage about it, and that's quite concerning considering the fact that it's just not being investigated whatsoever. There were people arrested, and then you'll find that they were sort of just released and no one's talked about it. It's a very, very hush-hush, and so we're just going to dive right into what happened, the theories, the possibilities, and really what not to do when you travel abroad. This is not the tourist's fault by any means, but it is something to be aware of if you are traveling. If you're new to my channel, make sure you are subscribed, and if you are loving my videos, sign up for the Genuine Gem newsletter, and that will make sure that you always are getting my videos. I will send them to you personally. That will be linked down below. Now let's get into the story. But first, a quick moment for our sponsor, Free Cash. Now, Free Cash is an online platform where you can make money by playing games. How cool is that? You sign up for free, you start receiving offers from different games to play, and all you have to do is download them, enable the app tracking data so Free Cash can actually follow your progress on the game, and then once you are playing the game, you'll be earning real money that you can cash out through PayPal. With summer coming up, a lot of us are wanting to make a little bit of extra money, whether that's for traveling or summer activities, and this is a way that you can do it online. You can do it in your spare time. It'd be perfect to download for a road trip that you're going on. I've made $50 so far and just cashed it out into real, actual cash to spend. But Free Cash is 4.5 stars on Trustpilot, and if you want to try Free Cash, you can get $5 bonus on your first offer using the link in my description or the QR code on the screen. Depending on your country, the interface might look different of Free Cash, but the functionality is the same. So just click that link in my description or scan the QR code. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2024 in Thailand, and Holly Bowles and Bianca Jones were two 19-year-old friends. They were friends since they were babies, best friends, more like sisters. Both were very strong-willed, smart, and independent, and in 2024, they traveled to Vientiane, Laos. They were both from Melbourne, Australia, and they were both young, adventurous girls. They wanted to experience different cultures and become backpackers, and they were doing this after graduation from uni, so they were celebrating at this time. Now, in September of 2024, Holly had left to travel, and then Bianca was going to join her about a month later. So they were together by November 4th, and they chose this tourist town due to it being popular among a lot of backpackers for partying, for adventure, and because their fathers, who were also best friends, had also traveled through Thailand together 25 years prior. So they were kind of going on this expedition in honor of their dads, and they were staying at the Nha Nang Backpacker Hostel. Now, Holly was said to be full of life, a confident young girl, and a great big sister. She spoke to her dad every few days and kept in contact with her mother pretty much every second of the trip. Bianca had an infectious charm and happy nature. She was a member of the football club, and the girls were said to be in Thailand having an absolute blast together. But on November 12th, the girls would actually go to the hostel, go downstairs from their rooms for a few free drinks, and then they left the hostel for the evening. They went out drinking at a JD bar, which was nearby. They were there until about 10:30 p.m. This bar was also said to offer a few free whiskey shots, and they also had a drug menu, which was selling opium, ketamine, marijuana. It was unknown if they actually took any shots or drugs at this bar. However, the next morning, they failed to check out of the hostel like they planned to do. Now, the hostel staff went to check on them on November 13th, and they were both found unresponsive. They were rushed to the local hospital before Holly was actually transferred to Bangkok Hospital and put on life support. She was the only one that was stable enough to be transferred at that time. But their family members were actually informed by a friend that they had made, that the girls were in the hospital, and so their mothers flew out that night. They had no idea what sort of condition their daughters were in or what had happened to them at all. Their fathers flew out the next day, and by this point they were at those separate hospitals, and Bianca was actually being transferred to Udon Thani Hospital over the border. The hospital told the parents that both girls were at risk for cardiac arrest and needed to be taken to these better hospitals. They had about a 1% chance of survival. Now, on November 21st, 9 days later, Bianca would pass away at the hospital. This was confirmed to be brain swelling due to high levels of methanol found in her system.
Right now, our daughter remains in intensive care unit in critical condition. She's on life support.
A day later, Holly passed away as well. Their cause of death was suspected to be methanol poisoning. These two girls never made it out of the hospital or back home alive from their travels. However, their bodies arrived back in Australia together. Now, according to the manager at that Nanan hostel, the victims had joined their other guests the night before they were found, drinking in that hostel lounge. They had free shots of vodka, and this was offered by the hostel pretty much every night, just as an add-on for guests. Then the manager said that they headed out and they returned in the early morning hours of the 13th. Now, if this wasn't horrific and suspicious enough, these were not the only tourists that this had happened to. In fact, the same exact day that the Australian girls were found unresponsive, 2 Danish girls were also found at the same hostel. They were friends as well. This was 20-year-old Anne-Sophie Orklid Koyman and 21-year-old Freya Vernevals Sorensen. They were having the time of their life on vacation before they were found unconscious in the hostel in their bathroom around 6 p.m. the evening of the 13th. They were sent to the local hospital, and they actually died in the middle of the night. They didn't make it as long as the 2 Australian girls did. Now, their medical team claimed that the cause of death was sudden heart failure. Their parents didn't hear from them for 3 days, and then on the 12th, they were meant to meet up with this local backpacker, and they didn't show up. So he actually was the one to track them to this local hostel, and then he found that they had been taken to a hospital. So he found the record of Anne-Sophie at the hospital, but not Freya. He found out through other tourists that these 2 Danish girls claimed that they may have consumed drinks laced with methanol, and that Anne-Sophie was actually vomiting blood for hours prior and having seizures on the bathroom floor. When they tried to get her help from the hostel, they didn't even get her an ambulance. So she was transferred there by taxi by her friends. But Freya hadn't been sick at that point. There were also no records of her at this hospital. So when this backpacker went to the hostel, he actually found Freya sick and unwell at the hostel and took her to the hospital as well. Their parents didn't know what happened after this that led to their deaths. Now, their fathers had to identify their bodies, but they were told no autopsy could be conducted in Laos due to the capabilities, or the lack thereof, in their developing country. However, their bodies had been embalmed in Bangkok prior to being sent to Denmark, so no autopsies could be given. Their death certificates stated that their deaths were heart failure. Nothing to do with poisoning, but their parents didn't believe that it was this natural death. In fact, their father said, how do you explain that 2 women in their 20s with no health issues prior to this suddenly in the same hostel on the same day had a heart attack, where a number of others had been linked to methanol poisoning? Unfortunately, that's not even where the tourist death ends. The same day of all of this, the hostel noticed that another tourist had not come out of their room. This was 57-year-old James Louis Huston, who was found on his bed, dead, surrounded by several empty drinks. It was reported he had no bruises or wounds on his body that would have suspected some sort of physical foul play, but he had checked into that hostel on October 20th, 23 days prior. Not much is known about him, but he was found DOA. Then a 28-year-old British woman named Simone White died on November 21st, the same day that Bianca Jones had passed away. Simone was staying at that same hostel where they gave out those free shots with her best friend Bethany Clark. On November 12th, Simone's friends would end up texting her mother saying that they were all in the hospital. They had woken up with headaches and it got worse throughout the day. They then took a taxi to a public hospital, and Simone's mom, Sue, got this message saying, "I don't want to worry you, but we're all in the hospital and they think it's acidosis. Simone is the worst affected of us all, but she's not doing too badly. Keep you updated." Her mother later got a phone call that Simone was in critical condition, and her mom would later say she knew during that phone call that her daughter was going to die. She then had to give the hospital consent for urgent brain surgery of Simone because she was doing so badly. And after that, she was on life support for 3 days before her mother had to turn off the ventilator herself due to the doctor's religions not allowing them to. Her cause of death was believed to be brain swelling due to high levels of methanol found in her system. Simone was a lawyer. She was said to be absolutely brilliant and lovely. She was an extrovert who was sporty and musical and who had just gotten a flat back home in England. She was described as the kind of person with the most wonderful energy and spark for life. The law firm where she worked said that she was a talented colleague with a bright future. One of her coworkers said she was the kindest, most genuine, and thoughtful person that they had ever met. She lived life to the fullest and encouraged everyone around her to do the same. 6 people deceased in the span of 10 days, all of whom were staying at the same hostel. But prior to their deaths being revealed to the public, ABC found that this hostel had many reviews that were deleted, warning others not to go there. One review said, "Do not go there. They have methanol in their drinks and me and 3 others have been hospitalized because of this." Another said, "I would avoid this hostel. I stayed at this hostel for 5 days. Myself and my friends were sick from consuming the free vodka there. People we know were taken to the hospital. Some even in intensive care with serious problems. The ones in the hospital have all had traces of methanol in their bloodstream, which is extremely dangerous. The only event that connects all of the different people is drinking at this hostel. It could be their supplier adding methanol to the alcohol or the hostel. My concern is the hostel is not taking this seriously enough. Every response from them is the same." Before this was all deleted, the hostel page actually responded, "This is a slander case. Please contact our WhatsApp number. We talk together. We want to address your concerns seriously and clarify a few points. Our hostel has been operating for 5 years, and during this time we have always prioritized the safety and well-being of our guests. We take any claims like this very seriously. We only serve free drinks that are well-known local brands in Laos, such as Tiger Whiskey and Lao Vodka." But since the media was not covering this right when it was occurring, the hostel was still checking in new guests and serving these free drinks. You see, the media is actually tightly controlled there, and that is why there has been such sparse coverage. So a 19-year-old Australian named Harry actually checked in after 3 were already deceased from this hostel. He had no idea he was drinking this free alcohol that was served at the hostel every night for 2 hours. And interestingly enough, he said that there were only free shots if customers gave a good online review. He said it was after that first night that he and his friends realized something was wrong. There were rumors about girls' drinks being spiked, and then police started showing up. They appeared to be questioning the hostel staff, but when the guests were asking what was going on, the staff would tell them that someone just smoked a joint. But the night after the police left, they continued to serve the free drinks, and no one of the guests were touching them.
They had the free shots again, and no one was touching any of the liquor on the second night. So I think at that point everyone sort of knew, okay, something's happening here. And we didn't party very hard on the second night because there was all these police around and we weren't sure. It was pretty quiet. Yeah, and it was just awful. Just hearing about it was not nice. And it sort of put a stain on what was Laos actually quite a nice place. But yeah, it just wasn't a great experience.
By the 22nd, with 6 victims deceased, this was finally brought to the attention of the public. No one was drinking anything, and they stuck to bottled or canned alcohol. The hostel manager, who was also the bartender, Duan Docton, denied culpability, stating that the same drinks were also served to 100 other guests that night who reported no problems, that he did not add methanol to the drinks at the bar, and that he had been in business for almost 11 years. And this was the first time something like this happened. When the police were there, he even drank drank out of one of the vodka bottles at the bar. Now, if you don't know, methanol can be used to increase alcohol's volume as a cheaper alternative, but this is illegal because it's flavorless, it's colorless, and it's not for human consumption due to the ability to quickly become toxic. It can cause nausea, vomiting, heart and respiratory failure. As little as 30 milliliters can be lethal. It can also take up to 24 hours to start showing signs of illness, and it was found that 14 survivors who were also drinking in Laos were said to develop methanol poisoning within days of each other as well.
Last week, I got severe methanol poisoning from a hostel in Van Vieng in Laos. I'm not trying to tarnish the country, its people, the hospitality business in any way by making this video. It is literally just to help spread awareness. I would just not want anyone to go through what me and my partner have had to go through in the past 2 weeks, because it has literally been like the worst 2 weeks of our life. So it's really normal for hostels in Southeast Asia to offer like a happy hour or an hour where you get free drinks, whether that be beers or spirits or cocktails. It just so happened that this hostel was offering either a free bottle of vodka or a free bottle of whiskey, and we had a big table of about 10 people, and we were all sharing what was given to us was like a bottle of locally sourced Lao vodka, and that's what we were all communally drinking. It wasn't until 15 hours later that my symptoms started to kick in, which were extreme tiredness. I was practically asleep for a whole day. I was violently throwing up. I was really lucid. I had visual impairment, like I could barely see. It was just like bright lights. And then my boyfriend made the decision to take me to a private hospital in Vientiane, and the people there literally saved my life. Me and my boyfriend had the same amount of vodka. I had to be hospitalized, he didn't, and he only got his bloods checked because I was in the hospital, and we both drank the same thing. So
10 minutes later, I was unable to breathe and I was gasping for air. By the time I had made it to the hospital, I was in the dark blind and I couldn't breathe, and it took a while for them to figure out what it was that was wrong with me, but they realized that there was a large amount of methanol in my system. It was also terrifying knowing that the doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. It was something that they hadn't seen before, and it was kind of a bit of a conundrum for them to figure out what was wrong.
13 years later for you now, what are the health effects that you are still living with?
So I'm blind now. I've got about 2% of my eyesight.
I imagine that it must have been a very particular experience for you hearing about this incident that's unfolded in Laos. What's it brought up for you?
A bit of trauma, a lot of empathy for the families involved, and of course the victims. I know how easy it is to say yes to a drink at the bar and not think anything bad is going to happen to you. And the only reason I'm alive today is because I was poisoned on my last night, and it took a couple days for the poison to start taking effect in my body. And I happened to have made it to a first world country and was able to be hospitalized in New Zealand, because had this happened in the middle of my trip while I was in Bali and I had to be hospitalized in Bali, I'm certain that I wouldn't be here, and I just would have been another death.
Now, with Holly Bowles passing, she was the last of the 6 victims. There were rumors that the hostel owner, DeWong, and a number of people had been detained by the police for questioning. However, at the time, Nan Nan Hostel was still operating but not accepting new guests. The staff did confirm that the manager and the owner were taken in. And by November 26, the Laotian government made their first and only statement about this case. They announced they were conducting investigations into the incident, and they expressed condolences to the families of the victims.
The government of the Laos PDR is profoundly saddened over the loss of lives of foreign tourists in Van Ven district and expresses its sincere sympathy and deepest condolences to the families of the deceased. The government has been conducting investigations to find causes of the incident and to bring the perpetrators to justice in accordance with the law.
But 8 male Vietnamese staff members of the hostel in total had been arrested at this point, and the hostel was closed. On December 1st, a document from the Ministry of Health's Department of Food and Drugs ordered the prohibition of selling and consuming Tiger vodka and Tiger whiskey, and that the factory making those products would be closed. This was following a health inspector's visit, who were accompanied by police, at this kind of dodgy, isolated factory found in Laos. The owner of this factory was arrested as well. Now, the documents also suggested that the poisoning's outbreak source could be that rundown facility outside the capital. They also found contamination that may pose a risk to public safety. But they were still arresting hostel staff members, and 3 more were arrested, 2 Indian men and 1 Filipino woman, leading many to believe that this wasn't simply just because of a factory mix-up. The Foreign Office then issued a warning to travelers coming to the country and consuming replica alcohol brands that may contain hidden amounts of methanol. A survivor named Bethany Clark, who was best friends with Simone White, the victim, wrote on the Laos Backpacking Facebook page, "Urgent, please avoid all local spirits. Our group stayed in Vang Vieng and we drank free shots offered by one of the bars. Just avoid them, as so not with it. 6 of us who drank from the same place are in hospital currently with methanol poisoning." She said that she herself became fatigued, and then she fainted, and then she felt nauseous, and then her liver started to shut down. She went to the hospital in time and underwent many infusions and tablets and days of recovery, and thankfully she did survive. Bethany Clark went on a media outlet this morning to talk about her experience, and that her and Simone had met up in Cambodia before going to Laos, and they had places they wanted to go after. They had gone tubing in Laos earlier that day on November 12th, and later that day they were drinking at the hostel. They had about 5 to 6 mixed drinks, and the next morning they started to feel sick, but they thought it was just a hangover. So they went on the tour they had scheduled, and then they went kayaking, but they couldn't even do that because they were so exhausted. They needed to lay down. They were both suffering with lethargy, and they weren't concerned and anxious about this at all, which Bethany believes was a sign of the poisoning, because she says normally they would have been very anxious people. They were then taken to the hospital by fellow tourists, and the doctors thought that they were drug users. They were then diagnosed with food poisoning, but as Bethany was getting better, Simone was getting worse, and after a few hours, a private hospital was actually called by one of their friends, and they were transferred there. Immediately, the private hospital diagnosed Simone with methanol poisoning. The next day, Bethany told Simone's mother she should come out, and Simone was in respiratory failure, so they were doing brain surgery on her to relieve that pressure, but that surgery then caused a brain bleed on the other side of the brain. The doctors told him it wasn't successful. She had 5% brain power left. Bethany talked about how she started getting paranoid in this different place where no one spoke her language. She could barely even talk to the doctors. But somehow Bethany made a full recovery.
You knew Simone basically all your life. From the age of 4, you met each other at primary school, right?
Yeah, it's been such a long time. Yeah, and it's been a great loss to everyone.
And you were best friends throughout your life?
Yeah, the whole time. So we actually went to different secondary schools, but Simone just kept us in touch, arranged all the plans. In 2017, we did a massive trip for 6 weeks. We did China, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, and then we actually went back to Thailand again, and we also did Bali, Australia, and then loads of places in Europe as well. So we went into Vientiane, we stayed there for 1 night, and then went on to Vang Vieng, which is where it happened. So we did the tubing, which is where you go on the rubber ring, you float down the river. So we'd had a really good time doing that, and then we went back to the hostel, which is where everything happened.
Is there anything that made you suspicious the minute you kind of started to drink them?
Not really, but I suppose when you think back, so I put a little bit of Sprite in initially, tasted it, and it tasted not very much. And I suppose if it was proper vodka, I probably would have been a bit taken aback, you know.
Just no update on the police investigation at all?
Yeah, we just hope that they will come to a conclusion on it soon.
And she said she has since been focused on Simone's funeral and getting her justice, and that she will work up to focusing on herself and her survivor's guilt after that. She has no idea why she survived and her best friend didn't. But she has not been given many updates on the investigation into her best friend's death. Now, by February 6th of 2025, 4 months since the deaths, the Australian government announced that their offers to send the Australian Federal Police to assist in the investigations, especially regarding their deceased citizens Holly and Bianca, have been denied. Bianca's father, Mark Jones, urged the Laos government.
I would like to take this opportunity to urge the Laos government to investigate this to the fullest extent to make sure this incident doesn't happen again. We'll forever miss our beautiful girl and hope her loss of life has not been in vain.
Then in March of 2025, the Jones and Bowles family tried to arrange a meeting with the Laos ambassador with the Australian government, but received no response.
It's still one day at a time. Some days it's an hour at a time.
Yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, it has been a roller coaster. We were just hoping for the best. You know, it was a really long flight to Bangkok. It felt like it took forever. And then we had another flight up to Udon Thani where the girls were. And I don't think you can ever prepare yourself for that. We just knew that they were alive, but that's really all we knew, that they were in comas.
We know that there's a few people that have been detained, and the Laos government just said that it's an ongoing investigation. That's all we really know.
Exactly. Yeah, it does make us angry.
Absolutely.
And, we would like just some accountability and justice for our girls.
The victims' families have now called for a tourist boycott of this country, saying that they have been denied justice and that the authorities are failing to act over this tragedy. Mark Jones stated that there has been no communication, no updates, it's incredibly concerning, and that it reeks of a cover-up. He said they were led to believe that 12 people were in custody, but they have since all been released. They have called this investigation disgraceful and horrendous. They believe that the Laos authorities are purposely keeping the locals out of this scandal, and they are concerned that someone could be set up or made to be a scapegoat. The families themselves have gotten Australia, the UK, and Denmark to come together for a joint diplomatic push for justice. One of the Danish victims and Sophie's family was never even contacted by the authorities about their daughter's death. Other tourists had to let them know, and at that point she had already passed away. The police had her passports, her information, contacts, but they didn't contact anybody about her death. Her parents also claimed that they were pressured into accepting a death certificate with no mention of the poisoning in order to have her body sent back to Denmark. Her father said the level of collaboration of the authorities, basically trying to hide a corpse in a closet, almost saying nothing happened, is absolutely ridiculous. They fear that due to this, their daughter won't be included in the criminal investigation of the suspected mass poisoning. Simone White's parents continue to fight for justice as well. Her mother has been working with British authorities who have opened an inquest into her death, but the results of her autopsy are contingent on the investigation in Laos being finished, so the inquest could actually take years to finalize. Now, the families of the 5 female victims have created a WhatsApp group to keep in contact and exchange any updates from their countries in the investigation, but none of them have gotten updates from Laos. The 12 arrested from the hostel and the factory have reportedly been released, but put under house arrest with their passports confiscated. It has not been confirmed if or where the suspected poisoning occurred, whether it was the hostel or the factory or both. However, the bars that the victims went to that night have been reopened. Now, a Laos-based lawyer who wants to remain anonymous stated that 2 articles in the country's penal code could be used to prosecute someone found to be responsible for manufacturing methanol that leads to mass poisoning, and that carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. But the victims' families say that that doesn't feel like enough because they have this sentence without their family members for the rest of their lives. Their children got this sentence of death. No penalty is going to fix that. They are pushing for some kind of accountability around what is going on. What do you think? Was this intentional mass poisoning? Was this something that was just to create more alcohol illegally by putting this methanol in and somebody put way too much inside? What do you believe? Was this happening at the factory? Was this happening just at the hostel? And are these people criminally responsible and should be held accountable or not? I think that the lack of investigation altogether is what's really angering these families. I think that if they were found not to be criminally responsible, that would be one thing, but they're not even being looked at as criminals or as people of interest. There's just no investigation happening at all. And I think that's what is really infuriating to the families more than anything. But let me know what you think. Have you heard of any other victims that this has happened to? It's terrifying to think of. And the fact that we just don't even know if it happened at the factory, at the hostel, at the bars they were going to. We have no idea, and the bars are reopening. I think also the fact that the media did not talk about this at all for 10 days until all 6 victims were deceased is so extremely concerning when there's so many tourists coming and going every single day. But please let me know what you think, and remember that if you want to try free cash and get a $5 bonus on your first offer, you can just click the link in my description or scan the QR code. Don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.